Today we are talking about the myth of Cupid and Psyche because it shows up in so many fairy tales, particularly animal bridegroom fairy tales. And it's wild and crazy like most Greek myths and romantic. The first and main written account of this story is actually Roman. It was written in the 2nd century AD by a guy known as Platonicus in the Metamorphosis, sometimes called the Golden Ass. It's part of the frame story. But we know it existed as a Greek myth long before that because this imagery shows up in so much Greek art. Now in Greek, it's referred to as Eros and Psyche, because Eros is Greek for Cupid, which is Roman, the god of love, Aphrodite's son who, shoots people with the arrow that makes them love people. Psyche in Greek means soul or breath of life. Her Latin equivalent is actually anima, which is where we get like animated, animal. But Platonicus called this Cupid Latin and Psyche Greek, and that's usually how it's referred to. The main version, like I said, is in a frame story about this dude who magically gets turned into a donkey and goes on a lot of adventures. He overhears the Cupid and Psyche story being told by an old woman to a young woman who's been kidnapped by pirates, and they're both being held captive in a cave. They do escape and end up okay if you don't want to be left hanging about that. But now, let's get into the story. There's a king and queen who have 3 beautiful daughters, but the youngest, Psyche, is the most beautiful. She's so beautiful that the people start making offerings to her instead of to Aphrodite, the goddess of love, sex, beauty. Of course, she's called Venus in this story. This obviously pisses Venus right off. So she sends Cupid to shoot Psyche with an arrow and make her fall in love with something hideous. However, he accidentally scratches himself and he himself falls deeply in love with her. In the meantime, Psyche's parents go to an oracle to find out who she's gonna marry, and the oracle gives them bad news. She's destined to marry a dragon-like creature who is so fearsome that even Zeus or Jupiter and the underworld fear him. So her family leads her to the edge of a cliff to offer her to this monster. It's both a funeral march and a bridal march. When she's left alone, Psyche is crying and weeping and so miserable about her fate that Zephyr, the west wind, takes pity on her, lifts her up from the rocky cliff and puts her in a beautiful meadow and puts her to sleep. When she wakes up, she sees this amazing castle with like gold and ivory columns. She wanders inside and a disembodied voice tells her, "Make yourself comfortable." And she is served a feast by invisible servants and played music by a lyre that plays itself. She's probably like, I don't know what this is, but it's better than being devoured by my possible dragon husband. And that night, a man she cannot see comes to her bed and has sex with her, which she is apparently down with because it says she starts to really look forward to those visits. So this continues on for a while. Sex with a strange man she can't not see at night, and then just having her needs met by invisible things during the day. One day she asks the disembodied voice if her sisters can come visit her, and Cupid is the disembodied voice. So the west wind brings the sisters up and they get really jealous of the splendor she's living in. So they're like, "Girl, you need to figure out your new husband's identity. It's probably that monster you were foretold to marry." So that night, after the mysterious man falls asleep, she gets a lamp and a dagger ready to see the creature and kill it, but it's a gorgeous man. She's so startled, she wounds herself on one of his arrows, which are beside the bed, and falls instantly in love with him. She also spills hot oil from the lamp on him, wakes him up. He instantly flees, and she holds on to him to try and keep him, and he's flying away because he's got the wings, and she falls and lands on a riverbank, and then decides, well, I'm just gonna wander until I find my lost love. And her sisters get punished because they decide they want what she has and think if they stand on the side of the cliff and wait, the same thing will happen to them. But the west wind blows them off the side of the cliff and they fall to a brutal death. Psyche tries to get help by making offerings to Ceres, Demeter, but that doesn't work. She goes to Juno or Hera, that doesn't work. And finally she realizes, I'm gonna have to go to Aphrodite/Venus. If I serve her, she will let me have Cupid back. Also, she is pregnant now with Cupid's baby. So everything she's about to go through, reminder she's pregnant through all of it. So Venus loves having Psyche under her power because she's hated her from the start. She turns her over to her 2 handmaidens, Worry and Sadness, and they whip and torture her. Venus tears her clothes, bashes her head into the ground, and mocks her for getting pregnant in a sham marriage. Then she starts to give her impossible tasks that we'll see repeated in later fairy tales. The first one is to separate like wheat, barley, poppy seeds, all these tiny little things. Of course she can't do it, but an ant takes pity on her and helps her do it. You also find out around this point that Cupid is injured from the hot oil incident, and he's kind of being held captive by Venus. Next, Psyche has to get golden wool from these violent sheep. She's so sure she can't do it, she goes to drown herself along the way. But a divinely inspired talking river reed says just gather the wool from what's caught on the briars instead of actually going to the sheep. And that's what she does. The third task is to get the black water from the Styx. She gets there and there's like dragons that are about to fight her, but Jupiter takes pity on her and sends eagles to fight the dragons. Her last task is to go to the underworld and get a box from Proserpina, or Persephone, queen of the underworld. The box is a dose of beauty. Again, Psyche's like, I'm just gonna die because I can't do it. So she goes to throw herself off a tower, but then the tower talks to her. It says, you'll be fine, just take 2 cakes of honeyed barley in your hands and 2 coins in your mouth. He gives the cakes to the 3-headed dog. The 2 coins are for the ferryman, 1 so she can get there and 1 so she can make the return trip. So she gets the box of beauty from Proserpina and she's going back, but of course she gets curious and wants to maybe open the box and make herself a little more beautiful. I mean, she's literally been through hell and is pregnant. I get it. But instead, she finds inside an infernal sleep, which sends her into this like Snow White stupor. Cupid, however, has healed and managed to escape his mother's house, and he comes and finds her. He draws the sleep from her face, puts it back in the box, and then in the moment that artists have loved to recreate since then, he swoops her up in his arms and flies with her in the box back to Venus. He then decides to just go over his mom's head and take his case to Zeus. And Zeus says, all right, I'll be on your side if you help me in the future whenever a choice maiden catches my eye. Ew, but Cupid says sure. Venus backs off because she has to, and then Zeus gives Psyche ambrosia to drink, making her an immortal god like Cupid. They get married for real as equals, and she gives birth to their child, who is named Pleasure. So pleasure is created between the marriage of love and the soul. Lots of people love this story and have used it as an allegory for many things. Even the earliest Christian writers were using it as an allegory for the soul, for the fall of man. Psyche being the soul that has fallen and needs to do all of these painful quests in order to receive immortality. There's a Gnostic text called On the Origin of the World, which states that the first rose was created from the blood of Psyche when she lost her virginity to Cupid. Writers have made poems and odes to this story for hundreds of years, and like I mentioned, its impact on fairy tales and folklore is enormous. Most animal bridegroom stories, like East of the Sun, West of the Moon, follow the exact same plot structure. A girl marries someone mysterious or horrifying or a weird animal or creature, but then it turns out he's a hot dude at night, and then once she spies on him, she has to go through all of these trials to win him back again. Universally, all over cultures, we love this story. Maybe because it starts with thinking you have a horrible fate, but ending up with an awesome one. Or that once you lose something wonderful, if you go through enough trials, you can get them back again. And be as freaking happy as Psyche looks in this painting. Check out my book, Dust Spells, which also involves romance that is incredibly satisfying. And my podcast, Folktales and Fairy Lore, link is in the bio.